So, here at Citywide, we're still young. We're here at Lena Valley. I think we're maybe 74 or something. So we've got a little way to go. We are doing something a little unusual in this sermon series, and you'll find the sermon notes if you're online on our website, and if you're in the room at Mornington or Lena Valley, there's also paper versions. Each year at Citywide, we pick one of three themes. Either follow, where we really focus on what does it mean to follow Jesus, share, what does it mean to be community, or bless, what does it mean to think outside the box and bless the community beyond us. And the theme this year is bless. And we're particularly been honing in after talking about 1 Peter on this question that is raised by 1 Peter, where he says, live your lives in such a way that people ask questions about why you're so hopeful. How come you're so hopeful? Where does your hope come from? And as we take this journey, we actually are doing this kind of weird thing of taking a secular book, which we would say, this book is not the Bible, but there are useful things because it's research based. It's not written, by the way, by Oprah Winfrey, whose name's on the bottom there. She just writes little comments right the way through it. It's written by Harvard professor Arthur C. Brooks. It's called Build the Life You Want. And he looks at the research of what makes a happy and whole life. And we've just finished kind of a subsection in the book about the 4 things you got to face to get rid of the blockages that stop you living a full and healthy life. We've talked about just the realisation that happiness isn't actually the goal of your life. Happiness comes and goes. So get used to the idea that sometimes you'll be sad in a full and healthy and whole life. We've also talked about the importance of learning to think about your thinking and not just being a victim of your thoughts. We've talked about our ability to make choices about our emotions. And last week, David was talking about the importance of thinking less about yourself. Funnily enough, you will have a happier, more whole and healthier life the less you think about yourself. Is one of the paradoxes of life, but also one of the reasons we're doing all of this is what the research shows, funnily enough, is the Bible knows what it's talking about. That all the principles that Arthur Brooks points out are principles that you'll find in the Bible. So after sort of clearing the decks and saying those 4 things you need to do in place in order to get rid of the stuff that holds you back, he then says there are 4 things that you need as kind of the pillars of a healthy and whole life. He says the first one is family, then you need friends, then you need faith. Interesting for a Harvard business professor to say you need faith. And then you need meaningful work. And again, what we'll be demonstrating is what this book is showing is just what the Bible has been saying all along. Today, we want to talk about family. By family, Arthur Brooks defines it as the people you live with and are related to by blood or adoption or marriage, kids, parents, siblings, and spouses. As we begin this conversation, I am conscious that I'm stepping onto tender kind of territory because there isn't such a thing as a family that hasn't caused pain to people. Right? There is no such thing as a perfect family. All of us carry scars, and some of us still carry open wounds from our engagement with our families. And many of us still carry sadnesses. Nevertheless, we need to talk about family because it does affect us so much. And the Bible talks a fair bit about family. Right there in the very start, it says, a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife and they become one flesh. That kind of, there's a new family form when people are married. Malachi gives a real picture, sort of builds on that picture, and he says a marriage is meant to be, or a family is meant to be a safe place. He says, has not the one God made you? You belong to him body and spirit. And what does the one God seek? Godly offspring. What does God want? He wants kids who are all they're meant to be. So, it's interesting, he says, be on your guard and don't be unfaithful to the wife of your youth. You see, in Old Testament times, it's hard for us to imagine, but the man had all the power in a way that there's still a power imbalance now, but in a way that's just hard for us to comprehend. A woman's economic future was tied up with her husband. And so one of the things God says, don't you go being unfaithful. He says, the man who hates and divorces his wife, says the Lord God of Israel, does violence to the one he should protect. So be on your guard and don't be unfaithful. He's saying those who have power in a family should use their power not just to focus on themselves, but to make sure the family is a safe place where kids can grow up without being damaged and where the wife can know she's safe. There's a bunch of other verses. It's fascinating that one of the interesting things, there are, in ancient literature, there are people like Aristotle and others wrote, this is how a family's meant to work. And always in the ancient literature, it is directed to a man to say, this is how you're meant to make your family work. The Bible, though, in the New Testament, actually addresses women directly and says, this is how you are to operate. But it also addresses kids directly. And it assumes that kids have agency, can make choices. And it says, kids, obey your parents in everything. And the very next line is, fathers, don't exasperate your kids. So there is this picture of the importance of family, that somehow family is a place where you're meant to grow up and be safe. And also there's this commitment to each other, even to the extended family. I find it interesting, Timothy says, anyone who doesn't provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. That there is, the biblical injunction is to care for your rellies. To actually, and that can be tough, you know. Sometimes your relative, everyone, I don't know if everybody has a strange uncle, but lots of people have strange uncles, and sometimes, you know, the extended family get-togethers can be a bit complicated. But this picture is you are to care for your relatives. Now, I'm also conscious in what the Bible meant by family and what we mean by family are actually now two different things. What we mean by family are normally mum, dad and two kids, and increasingly a single parent and some kids. The Bible was talking about family in terms of an extended family, but more than that, and what I'm about to talk about is as relevant not only to the family and your relatives, but also the Bible uses the word family to talk about the church. And there's this understanding in the Bible that the church is meant to be a family of God. In fact, the Old Testament prophet Hosea actually points forward and says, those people who are called not my people, again, would be called God's kids. Jesus himself says, well, I love this picture. Right at the start of John, it says, he came to that which was his own, but didn't receive them. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave them the right to become the children of God. That this picture is, as you open yourself to Jesus, you get to become part of a new family. And the book of Hebrews says, both the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. Galatians says, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. Albert Brooks is going to talk about the 4 things that damage families, and those same 4 things are the things that damage churches. And I also want to say, I think we've still got a journey, because we are so shaped by an individualistic culture that says it's all about you. it actually has weakened both families and churches. And I think we actually have to learn to step back into community, back into church and into family relationships, and to face the stuff that takes us away from that. There's one thing, as we begin to talk about the stuff that damages families and damages churches, I want to start by talking about something that is like a glue, really a super glue that helps hold families together and churches together that Albert Brooks doesn't mention, and that's prayer. One of the things I loved about Joy is I knew she prayed for me, and she prayed for her family, and there is something about the importance of prayer that can't be understated. Often in families, there'll be one or two people that God kind of taps on the shoulder and says, I want you to be praying for your family. And there'll be like often and it's kind of how it's meant to work. That often there'll be like a prayer warrior kind of person in your family praying for your family, and they are a gift. Those people are an absolute gift. Also, I don't know about, there's something about, and I'd be challenging you not just to delegate it to the prayer warrior person in your family, but to make sure you are also praying. For me, I have to keep working on my prayer life, and the way I do it is I actually write down the list of names of my friends and relatives and things that God's telling me to pray for, and I come back and use a list because I find it hard. I get distracted easily, so I need to do that. Also, just want to say, the research says that generally speaking, the divorce rate amongst Christians isn't that dramatically different to the divorce rate amongst people who aren't Christian, save for one subgroup. And the divorce rate amongst people who say they are Christian but also say they pray regularly with their partner is less than 5%, according to one research thing. And I don't know how, for Leanne and I, this is going to be awkward. I'll try, because it's going to be tempting to keep disclosing stuff that Leanne's going to squirm about on the front seat at Mornington. It's kind of handy she's over there and I'm here. But it is true. What I find is there's something about praying that's really vulnerable, and when we're fighting, not that we ever do, but if hypothetically we'd be fighting, it's kind of hard to want to pray with each other. And there's something about prayer that brings you back and helps you remember what's important. So for us, once I heard this stat, I thought, okay, we're going to focus on it. And mostly we try to pray together. And I used to love the times we'd have family meetings and we'd close them with prayer and all the kids would pray together. Praying, I think, is kind of like a super glue. Arthur Brooks doesn't mention it, but I wanted to put that in there up front. There are four things he says that are real challenges in relationship, and he suggested antidotes to those. The first thing is conflict. And if you have a family that hasn't had any conflict, well, let's be honest, you haven't. Conflict is part of life, and it's actually dangerous. It's actually really if to have a relationship where there is no conflict just means everybody's avoiding being honest. Arthur Brooks says we need to reframe our understanding of conflict. That just to understand that conflict is kind of like the price of admission to having a family. It is you are going to have conflict, and he says ordinarily. So there's that quote about conflict. Ordinarily, the most common kind of conflict is unmet expectations, where you expect someone to operate in a particular kind of way, like clean their room, for instance, and they don't clean their room. You can go through lists. I bet you can bring to mind lots of times. If you think of the conflicts that have happened in your family, it's where one person expected someone to operate in a way that they don't operate. He says there is the sort of the intense version of that, where it's like a values clash, where one person is, he puts it this way, he says, a values breach is where one family member rejects something about another's core beliefs, which is at the root of many family breakups or estrangements, where someone is acting and saying what this stuff that is core to who you are doesn't matter or isn't real. And that's where things get really difficult. We'll talk about his suggestions for how to address some of this stuff. Up front, though, I want to say it is right not to have a family where anything goes. Like in a family unit, it is actually right to define your values. We're going to talk, he will point out the importance of partners having shared values, like in terms of what really matters. I still remember I think I was about 13 and I was going to church with my dad, and I was rather keen to go to McDonald's and not church. I was a bit bored by church, and it didn't help me because I was trying to mount a philosophical argument why it was wrong to send you take your 13-year-old to church, and my dad quoted Joshua. And retrospectively, I think he was right. Didn't make me less annoyed, though. Joshua, what my dad said was what Joshua says, "As for me and my household, we'll serve the Lord." And one of the things you need to be able to say is, what is this family about? What does it mean to be part of this family? And it's right to have boundaries within a family. And we see Jesus had boundaries. You know, his mum and brothers came to collar him and say, "Mate, you're causing a bit of a disturbance. Let's go." And he said no. And he actually says, it would have been hard for Mary to hear this, "Whoever does the will of God is my mother or brother. Yet you don't set my agenda for me." Which is interesting. And so what Arthur Brooks would be saying is conflict is a necessary part of family life, but learning to do conflict well is really important. And he would not be saying, he would say, make sure you keep your boundaries firm. Just in all this, just in addressing this parenthetically, there is always a power imbalance in families. There is somebody who has the most power and somebody who has the least power in families, in all relationships. And it is never right to let abuse happen. It is never right to let abuse happen. We actually will run a course from time to time called Circuit Breaker, where we talk about how do you deal with family violence and abuse. So I won't go too much into that, but Albert Brooks says 3 things when it comes to managing conflict in your family. First one is don't try and read minds. Don't try and read minds. One of the particular challenges of a family is all your family lives rent-free in your head. That you have a picture of all your family members in your head. And it's amazing how, no matter how old you are, my grandmother was 80 and she'd go back to her family and they still called her Bub. Because in their heads, she was the baby, even though she was 80. It's amazing how you go back into your family and you slot back into family dynamics. And what he's saying is, don't just slot back into relating to the people who are in your head. Actually speak up and let people know what's actually happening for you, and do your best to listen to other people. He's also saying, live your life, live from your values. Don't just compromise all your values for other people, but also don't try and make other people's values the basis of your love for them. It's okay for them. Jesus would hang out with tax collectors and prostitutes and Pharisees. He wouldn't make having shared values the basis of his relationship. So it's really important, particularly in families and churches. we have a collection of people coming from all kinds of different experiences, and it's important to be committed to the relationship, even if people have different values to you. And he said the third thing is what is normal. One of the things I've learnt about being a parent, and then as your kids grow older, and as I think about my relationship with mum and dad, is you start to take people for granted unless you need them. And one of the things that Albert Brooks would say is, don't treat your family like emotional ATMs. Like, actually do the work to see them as real people and not just as two-dimensional people who are there to meet your needs. So that's conflict. He would say that's the first challenge. He said the other challenge we have in terms of wrong expectations is we expect ourselves to be compatible. And he would say that often families have problems because people are different, and we expect people to think like us. One of the things I've learned about me and Leanne is we are really different, like really, really different. Like the way she will see like how a cup could look with this word on it and think, what a great idea, let's do 100 of those. And she can see the project in her mind. And she'll walk into a kitchen and see how it could be, or she'll walk into a lounge room and see that it's messy. I just don't. Her brain works so differently to me. And one of the things Albert Brooks says is, get next to the idea that people are different. That actually, and in a church, people are genuinely different. That's actually one of I think the heresies in the Christian church is that you should find a church where people think like you and act like you and talk like you. That's a cult. That's not a church. Church is meant to be a place where people are different, and your family is a place, if it's healthy, where people are different. So he says 3 strategies: name and appreciate the differences between people. Focus on what really matters. And this is tough for me. You see, what really matters to me is sometimes different to what really matters to Leanne. Like, I'll be telling her, no, what's really different is what really important is we have this deep conversation right now, but she'll be seeing the messy lounge room. And sometimes I've got to help clean the lounge room, hypothetically, of course, in order to have the important conversation. So do the work to work out what really matters. And the other thing that he says is we actually have a disease happening right now for younger people under 30. They're basing their relationships on apps in terms of finding people. And one of the things the apps are doing are helping people try and find compatible people. That actually what you need for a healthy relationship, if you're looking for a partner, is not somebody who's compatible, but actually somebody who's different to you. And so one of the dangers can be we can create this expectation that it's really important you have shared values, but you actually want somebody who complements you, not who is the same as you. And so he would say, trust your friends more than trust apps in terms of picking partners and things. So that's the 2 things, the 2 ingredients that are often wrong expectations. He said there are 2 things, actually there's 3 things, but 3 other things. One is that often there can be this negativity that builds in the culture of a family. He calls it the negative virus. And I've seen it happen. It happens sometimes in our small groups in churches or in a congregation or in groups of friends, where it's like that they just become negative. He says this: a negative culture in a family can almost make problem solving impossible. So there's no growth or learning, just everybody's unhappy. That often occurs because of what he calls emotional contagion. Neuroscientists do the work, and they can tell you there's a thing called emotional contagion. What that means is you're likely to pick up the feelings of the people you hang out with. It's a way we've got what they call mirror neurons, and we do pick up stuff from each other. Turns out the Bible's on top of this. And that's why it talks about rejoicing with people who rejoice and mourning with people who mourn. Anyway, I won't go too far down to that. It says it happens because of emotional contagion. There's not it's not like there's something particularly wrong. It's just that there's a kind of a this sucks kind of attitude going on. And so he suggests if you feel like your family or your church or your small group or whatever group you're part of has a bit of a negativity virus, there are three things you can do. First of all, put on your own oxygen mask first, according to that's what you hear when you go on the planes, isn't it? Before you try and fix the culture, make sure you are on top of your own emotional well-being, and make sure you can then, from a place of positivity, engage with the negativity. It's pretty important. Secondly, don't take negativity personally. If there's a negative culture, often it can be, it's because everybody's getting hurt, and everybody's hurt then hurts others. And so as much as possible, separate yourself out and make sure this isn't personal. Thirdly, one of the things you can do, one of the things I've learned in our family is often if it feels like things were getting a bit intense and a bit negative, changing the channel, not having a big discussion. I've tried a number of times where I'll sit people down and say, let's talk about this, and that doesn't work. What does work is it says, let's get in the car and go somewhere. And actually the research says, he talks about a surprise, enjoyable, different kind of activity. Like there are times where I'll feel like we've got to get things resolved, but actually what we need to do is get out of the house and do something different. And that actually changes the channel in terms of a negativity issue. Again, I'd love to unpack more how the Bible talks about this, but certainly there is this general theme that you see come through where, like in Romans, it says, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. In 1 Peter, it says, don't repay evil or insult with insult. That basically, we as followers of Jesus are meant to sort of be circuit breakers. If there's a negativity virus going on, we need to bring positivity rather than negativity. We don't just reflect the culture. We need to be not just like thermometers, but thermostats, people who change the temperature in the room. Does that make sense? Two other things. Families are dangerous places where we don't know how to forgive. And the same with churches. I don't know how to tell you this, but the people you love the most are also the people you hurt the most because you're closest to them. And the Vicky Verka, those who love you the most are also the ones who are hurt most by you. And we need to, the glue that holds a church together, but the glue that holds a family together is forgiveness. Matthew chapter 18 is a whole chapter on how to hold a community together in the Bible, and half the chapter is about forgiveness. And it starts with Peter saying, yeah, but how often do I have to forgive? It's not easy, Jesus. How often? 7 times. Like maybe, my brother Andrew, he's a bit of a pain in the neck. I reckon I could forgive him 7 times. And Jesus says, no, mate, not 7 times, but 70 times 7 times. And I've got a little video about how that relates back to Genesis. But basically, Jesus is saying, you don't stop forgiving, Peter. Forgiving, you've been forgiven. So live a life of forgiveness. And it's not simple. There are 4 levels of forgiveness that Albert Brooks talks about, but this is so at the heart of the gospel. This is where Christians are meant to be different, where we don't react in the normal way, where we don't lash out when we get hurt, but we actually love. And so he talks about 4 levels of forgiveness. The first kind of level is where you say, okay, I think we need to talk about this. And that where you do the work of engaging with, okay, this is the issue, let's wrestle it through. Then the second time is where you say, look, you hurt me, but I choose to forgive you, where you actually say, I forgive you. The third kind of one, and this, one of the things I hadn't really twigged to this, but this happens heaps in families, where you kind of do non-verbal forgiveness, where you don't actually say, I forgive you, but you just give them a hug or smile at them a little later on. Or sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get there, but it's kind of a non-verbal kind of forgiveness. And the other kind is getting to the point where you realise, well, that thing maybe isn't the biggest deal in the world. Like it isn't actually maybe a moral failure on their part, but so you don't have to necessarily forgive, but you just sort of reclassify it in your head and say, this isn't actually something I need to forgive, this is just them, whatever. So there, he also says, look, we have to look out for the two fake forgivenesses, the unhelpful kind of forgiveness, where he says there is conditional forgiveness, where you kind of say, okay, I am going to forgive you if you do A, B, C, D. That's conditional forgiveness. And what you are doing in that is grasping for power over them. And that is not forgiveness. And often that perpetuates open damage in relationship. That's conditional forgiveness. Secondly, pseudo-forgiveness is where you say, I forgive you, and then 5 minutes later you say, but remember when you did that? And the same thing comes over. And if it keeps coming up, it's not forgiveness. So that's fake or pseudo-forgiveness. Lastly, Brooks says did I not, was there something else? No, that's right, that's those two. So the other cancer that comes into families and churches is dishonesty, where you're just not real. And we learn to avoid the complicated discussions because it's just easier, and we end up living parallel lives where we don't meet anybody actually. The research says, and turns out the Bible says, it's better to be honest. The research says complete honesty, no white lies, no exceptions is worth the consequences because it reduces stress, deepens connection with others, and reduces emotional reactivity. I love the way Ephesians puts it. It says, look, you're children of light. Don't live in the darkness. And it actually says, everything exposed to the light becomes visible. This is Ephesians 5. And everything that's illuminated becomes a light. That somehow, it's this, I don't know if you notice this, but it's the stuff you hold back that causes damage. It's a bit like a cancer. It's scary, to be honest, and sometimes families aren't ready or don't know how to cope with it, and so you need to grow up, because that's what Ephesians says. Speaking the truth in love, we grow up into him who is the head. That it takes courage and it causes you and the people around you to grow up, but honesty turns out really is the best policy. 3 things. First, before being honest, ask other people to be honest with you. Build a culture where you look at... I learned this early on in leadership, where I just learned to say, tell me what you think my strengths and weaknesses are, before I would give them any feedback. Ask people to be honest with you, and if you can do that, then it lays the groundwork where you can be honest with them. Second, whenever you are going to be honest, your job is to speak the truth in love, not to get something off your chest. You speak the truth to heal, never to harm. And third, think about how you communicate, the words you say, the timing. Think about how you say it in a way that it can be heard. One of the things I've learnt is Leanne and I use I'm gradually having to build like a mental translation book for my wife. She uses different language than I use. The same words mean something different for her, and it's true in all people. So think through, how do you communicate honestly in a way they can hear it, not in a way that makes sense to you, if that makes sense. So there's a bunch of stuff in all that, but all that to say, family really matters. Family does really matter. All the research says and the Bible says family matters. And you won't accidentally have a healthy family. It actually requires you to do the kind of work that Albert Brooks is talking about here. Well, he puts it this way. He says, don't avoid conflict, which is your family's opportunity to learn and grow if you understand where it originates and manage it appropriately. He also says, you naturally think compatibility is the key to relationship success and difference brings conflict. In truth, you do need enough compatibility, particularly around values, to function, but not all that much. What you really need, he says, is complementarity to complete you as a person. You need people who have strengths where you have weaknesses, actually. He says, the third thing, the culture of a family can get sick from the virus of negativity. This is the basic emotional management issue. And that's what he was talking about when he talks about for yourself. But the same things that help you be healthy, help a family be healthy, applied to a group instead of you as an individual. He says the secret weapon in all families is forgiveness. Almost all unresolved conflict comes down to unresolved resentment. So a practice of forgiving each other explicitly and implicitly is extremely important. And finally, explicit forgiveness and almost all difficult communication require a policy of honesty. When families withhold the truth, they cannot be close. It's the same, those same 5 points are the same points for churches. He says, so there's those 5 things you need to be conscious of and actively work to deal with. And he finishes by saying this, don't give up. Don't give up. It's easier to give up. He says, his words are never give up. Even if, because the not giving up means you're needing to, because you're putting boundaries in place, you're needing to step back from a relationship to keep everybody safe. You don't give up on the person. Doesn't mean you take the boundaries away. One of the things I hadn't noticed before, until Anne mentioned it when we did the sermon run through, one of my favourite verses I would often talk about in terms of churches working together is from Psalm 133. It turns out it's actually talking about brothers. Like, don't know if you've noticed, brothers often are quite different. If there's going to be sibling complexity, it's often between brothers. Not always, but often. I mean, sisters can sometimes be a bit catty too. So I think you could read into this. But this is what Psalm 133 says, how good and pleasant it is when brothers, and I think you can say or sisters, or mums and kids, or live together in unity. One of the things we've seen is it doesn't happen accidentally. Building your imperfect family takes work. Building your church as a healthy community takes work. But it's like the psalmist says, precious oil poured on their head. This is hard for us to imagine as a good thing, like it sounds like a cooking accident or something. But in the Old Testament times, oil was this symbol of refreshment. It was this idea that it's like having if you've been on a hike for a week and you haven't had it's like having a shower after being on a hike for a week, is kind of the picture. Running down the beard, running down Aaron's beard, this picture of sort of abundance, overflow. It's as if the dew of Hermon were falling on Mount Zion, like the parched land gets what it needs. And there's this picture, for there the Lord bestows his blessing, even life forevermore. I think it's true. Doing the work to bring health and wholeness to your family is genuine work. And it's not easy. And you do carry scars from your family. And they carry scars from you. But this kind of work is where God bestows a blessing. It's the same for a church. The same work that is required to bring a healthy health to a family is required to bring health to a church. We need each other and we need God's help. Let's pray. Jesus, we just want to say thank you so much for our families. Even as we say that, it's easy to jump to the points of pain, to where things aren't where we want them to be, where there's sadness about that, or pain, or scars, or even open metaphorical wounds. Jesus, please help us, though, address these 5 areas where damage happens. Help us address conflict healthily. Help us realise it's okay to be different. Help us, where there's negativity, just bring positivity in a healthy kind of way. Help us forgive and help us be honest. And we acknowledge we really need your help with that. Because all of us carry pain from where it hasn't happened for us. And so being able to be there for others isn't always simple. Can you help? Can you help us bring our pain and lay it at the foot of your cross and be agents of your health and wholeness in our families and in our church? We ask this in your name. Amen.